The training bells stopped ringing, and 12 martial artists watched as Keanu Reeves was at the martial arts dojo when the sensei told him that matrix moves don't make real martial artists, during an intensive kata session that would challenge his understanding of authentic martial arts discipline versus entertainment choreography. Shaolin Traditional Dojo, West Los Angeles, January 2024. The sacred training space occupies a converted warehouse where authentic martial arts mastery meets Hollywood preparation, where genuine fighting discipline determines community respect more than entertainment industry choreography or action movie credentials that reduce martial arts to visual sequences designed for dramatic effect rather than understanding combat as spiritual discipline requiring years of mental and physical development. The dojo embodies traditional martial arts culture, hardwood floors that absorb decades of disciplined practice, ancient weapons displays that reflect centuries of combat evolution, meditation areas that create contemplative atmosphere for spiritual development rather than physical demonstration serving entertainment purposes without addressing genuine warrior consciousness. Keanu Reeves, 59 years old, adjusts his traditional GI while processing kata sequences that challenge conventional action preparation through spiritual frameworks extending beyond matrix choreography toward authentic martial arts that traditional training demands from students whose credibility must span mental discipline rather than relying solely on physical technique or wire work capability. His preparation includes extensive matrix and John Wick fight coordination that emphasizes tactical movement and visual impact, stunt training that serves action sequences while revealing spiritual gaps in fundamental martial arts principles that prioritize warrior consciousness and philosophical understanding over functional movement designed for entertainment effectiveness. This kata requires flowing between physical precision and spiritual awareness, Keanu observes while struggling with traditional sequence, noting the mental demands that balance combat technique with meditative discipline extending beyond action training toward warrior development that few entertainment performers encounter despite intensive fight preparation. Different kind of performance challenge than choreographed combat, he continues, recognizing the parallel between authentic martial arts discipline and entertainment fighting that prioritizes visual spectacle over spiritual truth requiring sustained commitment to warrior consciousness and philosophical understanding that most action training never addresses comprehensively. His session begins with appreciation for martial arts culture that operates independently of entertainment industry functionality, seeking spiritual challenge that serves warrior development rather than maintaining established physical patterns through familiar combat techniques that generate dramatic success without advancing spiritual understanding or philosophical knowledge. The dojo attracts traditional practitioners whose martial commitment reflects deep engagement with warrior philosophy rather than functional training based on combat application, students who understand spiritual requirements while recognizing mental demands that serve both physical mastery and philosophical recognition requiring sustained spiritual development. The training environment includes master instructors whose martial expertise informs traditional combat concepts, international practitioners whose discipline spans classical and modern techniques, meditation teachers whose understanding of warrior psychology provides foundation for spiritual development that transcends physical capability toward authentic martial consciousness. Most actors who attempt martial arts want impressive techniques for performance rather than developing actual warrior discipline, explains Sifu Chen, a master instructor whose own martial experience encompasses decades of traditional and spiritual training. They approach combat through physical capability rather than recognizing spiritual requirements that define authentic martial arts and warrior consciousness. As session progresses, Keanu demonstrates respectful engagement with martial concepts and spiritual complexity, recognizing warrior authenticity that extends beyond his current knowledge while avoiding functional approaches that treat martial arts like enhanced action training rather than understanding combat as spiritual practice requiring sustained philosophical development. The dojo's reputation attracts legitimate martial arts community members whose warrior authority creates evaluation standards for distinguishing genuine spiritual engagement from entertainment appropriation that treats combat like performance enhancement rather than understanding martial arts as cultural discipline requiring sustained spiritual commitment. From his position at Dojo Center, Master Lu observes Keanu's martial attempts with growing understanding of spiritual requirements that distinguish martial arts from functional combat toward warrior development requiring practitioner whose authenticity spans physical technique and spiritual truth that few action-trained performers successfully integrate. Lu represents authentic martial authority, combat expertise earned through decades of traditional training and spiritual discipline, warrior knowledge developed through studying ancient fighting systems, spiritual integrity that prioritizes authentic development over commercial accommodation that might compromise martial vision for entertainment appeal or action effectiveness. He watches Keanu's kata performance with practiced assessment earned through distinguishing genuine martial engagement from functional limitation that action training might create through emphasis on technique over spirit, recognizing movement patterns that reveal preparation approaches unsuited for warrior consciousness. The martial framework requires understanding combat as spiritual discipline rather than physical tool, technique as philosophical expression rather than functional application, training as consciousness development rather than skill acquisition, mastery as spiritual awakening rather than technical achievement, concepts that challenge action-trained performers. As training deepens, Keanu demonstrates growing appreciation for martial concepts while revealing combat approaches that emphasize physical control and tactical efficiency rather than engaging spiritual frameworks that inform martial arts through warrior consciousness requiring sustained philosophical commitment beyond functional preparation. His attempts focus on executing techniques correctly rather than expressing spiritual content through movement, approaching martial arts through action precision rather than warrior flow that requires understanding combat as philosophical conversation between practitioner and spiritual intent rather than technical demonstration. 9 seconds pass as Lu evaluates Keanu's martial engagement and apparent limitation in accessing spiritual expression that martial arts requires from practitioners whose warrior authenticity must support spiritual communication rather than reducing combat to functional sequences serving entertainment purposes. Matrix moves don't make real martial artist, Lu declares with devastating precision earned through distinguishing authentic warrior discipline from entertainment combat that treats martial arts like enhanced action training rather than recognizing spiritual work requiring sustained philosophical commitment and warrior consciousness beyond physical capability. His assessment exposes fundamental requirement that prioritizes spiritual authenticity over functional competency for martial expression that serves as warrior communication rather than entertainment demonstration, recognizing contemporary martial expectations for spiritual credibility that requires practitioner whose philosophical understanding supports innovative expression rather than technical accommodation. The declaration carries particular significance because martial arts represents spiritual breakthrough that demands practitioner whose philosophical engagement supports warrior tradition rather than reducing martial complexity to functional application that might compromise spiritual vision for physical accommodation or entertainment effectiveness. Dojo members respond with understanding of spiritual factors that influence martial development beyond physical considerations, recognizing authentic warrior success that depends on practitioner capability whose spiritual authenticity supports traditional expression that functional preparation might not provide without corresponding philosophical engagement. Keanu's face shows recognition of evaluation criteria that prioritizes spiritual expression over physical capability, his action training conflicting with martial requirements that warrior discipline demands from practitioners rather than accepting functional interpretation as substitute for spiritual understanding and philosophical commitment. But before Keanu can respond with arguments about his matrix preparation or defend his combat approach through action training and sustained physical regimens, he demonstrates understanding that acknowledges spiritual requirements while respecting warrior expertise requiring philosophical engagement rather than functional performance. Master Lu, Keanu says respectfully, his voice carrying genuine recognition of martial authority rather than defensive performer pride. You're absolutely right about matrix training versus real martial arts. I need to engage spiritual discipline and warrior consciousness at fundamental levels rather than approaching combat through action efficiency that might not serve martial community. Lu appreciates Keanu's immediate understanding of spiritual demands and willingness to accept warrior requirements rather than defending functional preparation that might not serve martial concepts despite genuine commitment to combat excellence through established action techniques and professional coordination. Keanu continues with growing recognition of spiritual authority. When you say matrix moves don't make martial artist, you're addressing the need for warrior consciousness engagement rather than treating martial arts like enhanced action training that prioritizes physical efficiency over spiritual communication and philosophical development. The acknowledgement demonstrates Keanu's understanding that martial success requires serving spiritual authenticity rather than adapting combat concepts to accommodate functional interpretation, recognizing warrior reality that influences martial decisions beyond personal physical preference or established action patterns. Lu recognizes Keanu's revised approach and willingness to accept spiritual requirements, his expression shifting as he appreciates respectful acceptance of warrior criteria rather than defensive positioning that might complicate collaborative development of martial expression requiring unprecedented spiritual engagement. Over following months, Keanu pursues extensive martial education while Lu provides spiritual resources to support warrior understanding that serves combat authenticity, demonstrating collaborative development that balances spiritual requirements with practitioner capability rather than compromising martial standards or abandoning warrior ambition. The collaboration results in an integrated approach that maintains spiritual authenticity while providing practical framework for combat development, recognizing that warrior understanding requires sustained study and philosophical commitment rather than immediate comprehension that might not serve either martial vision or practitioner development effectively. The martial community observes with understanding as spiritual training demonstrates complex development process that balances warrior authenticity with practitioner capability, recognizing master authority that prioritizes martial success over functional preparation despite genuine commitment to combat excellence through established techniques. Years later, Keanu speaks about the dojo as educational about martial requirements, spiritual authenticity, and warrior development that serves genuine expression rather than accommodating functional approaches despite sincere commitment to combat excellence and physical preparation beyond previous limitations. Lu occasionally references that training session as example of how martial education requires spiritual engagement when practitioners choose warrior learning over functional assumption and philosophical respect over combat that treats martial community like performance venue rather than understanding martial arts as spiritual discipline requiring sustained warrior commitment. 9 seconds in traditional dojo in 2024. One moment when functional preparation met spiritual requirements before warrior understanding enabled appropriate martial development. One choice that served spiritual vision rather than functional accommodation and proved that authentic martial arts requires warrior consciousness and philosophical commitment rather than physical capability alone. The session that showed genuine martial arts demands spiritual authenticity and warrior consciousness that can't be substituted through functional training or action preparation alone, because authentic martial community depends on philosophical understanding and spiritual consciousness that entertainment industry success doesn't automatically provide despite professional physical preparation designed for dramatic effectiveness rather than warrior development and spiritual awakening.